Hello, and a very warm welcome to COVID-19 Updates from Singapore. My name is Caitlin Wee, and I'm a third-year medical student at NUS Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine. This is a series of webinars presented by NUS Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University Health System, and Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network. The COVID-19 Updates from Singapore weekly webinar series will provide viewpoints and insights from a panel of leading experts in infectious diseases and related specialties and disciplines. It is now my honor to introduce you to our moderator, who is also the program director of this series. Recruited to establish an infectious disease training program in Singapore, he was the first infectious diseases head of department in the Communicable Disease Center here in 1992. He is currently Associate Vice President for Health Innovation and Transformation, National University of Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, Associate Professor David Allen.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, and welcome to the 20th installment of our webinar, COVID-19 Updates from Singapore. We hope you are safe, happy, and well. The topic for tonight's discussion will be antiviral clinical trials for severe COVID-19 in China. Our guest expert this week to help us explore that subject is Professor Cao Ben, whom I'll formally introduce after Dale's epidemiology update. Just a review of the episode for you. We'll start off with Dale with an update of regional and international COVID-19 epidemiology. After that, Prof Cao will deliver his in-depth lecture, and then there'll be a question and answer discussion session with him on the topic. Please send in your questions. There's over 1,000 of you watching tonight. We'll get to as many of your questions as possible. After the question and answer session, Dale will provide a weekly review of current events. And in the concluding segment of our episode, I'll provide a preview of next week's guest expert and reveal the mystery pandemic song of the week. Please send in your questions and we welcome your comments. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dale Fisher, who's Professor of Medicine, National University of Singapore, Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, Senior Consultant, Division of Infectious Disease, National University Hospital, and Chair of the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network hosted by World Health Organization. Dale, over to you.
Thanks, David. So let's get to it. It's much the same as last week in these terms. We're seeing 1.8 million more diagnosed cases and an extra 40,000 deaths over the last week. And the front-running countries remain the same with US, Brazil, India, Russia, and South Africa. I'm going to go through, as I do, some of the epi curves and just highlight a few countries of interest before we get to Cao Ben. So you can see from this global epi curve that really over the last few weeks it's been about the same. The number of cases being about 300,000 a day, number of deaths around 5,000, 5 to 7,000. You can see the number of daily cases by country. So US has come down significantly. So India is now the diagnosing the most cases and the most deaths. US at 40,500, so around almost half. Brazil also down significantly from where it was, but you can see South America is really featuring. Philippines has taken the Western Pacific region into this list, and here's the charts for each of the WHO regions. So 150,000 cases and around 3,000 deaths. Europe's notable for its large number of cases and fewer deaths, and I can break that down for you a little bit later. CRO is typically largely driven by India and neighboring countries. Eastern Mediterranean region is still having a lot of deaths and clearly a lot of low ascertainment of cases. This is the African region, and WIPRO's now got this familiar upswing, although perhaps flattening out over the last couple of weeks. And again, we can go through that. So starting with the Americas, you can see each of the epi curves here if you go down. So US, Brazil, Colombia, and get an idea of the numbers of cases in the last 24 hours. So again, we can do that for each country in the Americas. Moving forward, what I'd like to point out is that it's really quite flat. The percentage change over the last 7 days compared with the previous 7 days is pretty close to zero. That's the new cases per week, both, and also the cases per million population, and also the deaths. I guess the one to pick out is Peru, that had a large number of deaths. And I guess when you see something like this, you have to wonder if the hospitals and the health system's getting overwhelmed. That's a very large increase in deaths. So I just want you to just remember these numbers, these cases per million population, but especially the deaths per million population, the sort of double figures generally, because I'll show you to some other countries later. So if we look at the US, we haven't looked at it specifically for a while. They're up over 5.3 million cases and about 170,000 deaths. A lot of clusters in nursing homes. In fact, the nursing homes are 80% up in the summer compared to the winter months. So that theory of it'll go away in winter, so in summer, certainly didn't even apply to the nursing homes. And the long-term care facilities have got about 40% of all their deaths. In Mississippi, I read that there's been 170, or there are currently 178 outbreaks in long-term care facilities. Remarkably, these minks keep coming up, and there's been 2 outbreaks in mink farms. You'll remember we discussed those in the Netherlands and Denmark and Spain, but there's no plans to cull all these minks. As I've said before, I didn't realize mink furs were still a good thing. US is having quite heterogeneous epidemiology, as you'd expect in a big country. A lot of stuff happening with, we mentioned last week about young people being the source of many outbreaks, and we're seeing those in universities and colleges who are trying to socially distance, but not very successfully. University of North Carolina's had an outbreak with 177 cases when they opened on August the 10th. By August the 18th, they closed again. Notre Dame has stopped in-person cases. Michigan State University's had 187 cases, University of Kentucky. So there's been some restrictions. It varies a lot between states, but there's a lot of linkage to bars and alcohol consumption in general, as has been seen in Canada and Australia as well. I thought this was interesting. David, you can tell me, this is called a die-in. Apparently this is a way of protesting, and these are people saying they don't want to go to college. So it's called a die-in, where they all pretend to have died. They're socially distancing, but I think it's probably a fine line between a die-in versus actually just pleasantly lying on the grass on a sunny day. I'm pretty sure this girl's sunbaking, but anyway, this has been a feature recently in a lot of the colleges. Going south of the border to Mexico, they've got some problems there. Their test positivity rate is 62.9% now. It's been over 50% for months. And they're noticing a huge difference between the wealthiest and the poorest and how they get infected. There's this place here called
Oaxaca.
Oaxaca, yes. I actually Googled how to pronounce it. I've been so embarrassed.
But I'm right down the hall.
Anyway, Oaxaca and these farmers that are called Zapotec farmers, and they're learning how to protect themselves. They've really isolated themselves off, and they're pretty independent anyway, I gather, in terms of food and things. But a lot of these indigenous communities and underprivileged groups are really suffering. There's obviously not nearly enough testing being done as well. Oaxaca. So you can see in the the European region, there's quite a lot of cases, right? So Germany, France, Spain, but we're not seeing massive shutdowns, and I must say that's quite pleasing that they're really trying to work through this with its various introducing various social restrictions and things like that. And if we go to this one, and remember I asked you to just remember those numbers, look at the deaths in million population here. They're really quite low. So this is not an anomaly. This is really across the board that obviously methods to protect the vulnerable, obviously the nursing home patients, must be succeeding, because despite having pretty high number of cases per million population, the deaths aren't coming through. So I think that's probably something to note, and you see it in other regions as well. So I'll just put this here if you want to see. We're still getting, you know, lots of upticks in these places, particularly in Eastern Europe, but now also Western Europe because of the holidays. This is deaths in Greece as well. So if we actually have a look at Greece, 7,000 cases, 226 deaths as of a couple of days ago. They've got these refugee camps. This is one in Chios, and they've just diagnosed it. It's called the Vial camp, V-I-A-L, and they've just diagnosed the first case of someone in one of these refugee camps. So there's thousands of asylum seekers that live in these places, and they're generally overcrowded. So it, I guess it sounds a little bit familiar. They've got a test positivity rate of 0.8%, so that's very healthy. France, because of their uptick, you can see this over here, they've done more mandating of masks, and I didn't realize it before, but the Champs-Élysées was exempt from mask wearing until recently. So there you go. Even COVID can go to the Champs-Élysées. Southeast Asian region, as I said, it's very much an Indian story with the number of cases and the number of deaths. Breaking that down though, again, that it's the deaths per million population, which is fairly impressive. Nepal, they've also had a spike. It was July 21st, they ended a 4-month lockdown. But because of this surge in cases, they've closed all the schools again, and they've banned religious gatherings. This was obviously an event on July 21st as well. They reopened Mount Everest. I guess if you think it through, it's not a good place to get sick. So maybe it probably was a good idea to close that off as well. Looking at the Eastern Mediterranean, you can see once you get that black line above the green epi curve, then you've got proportions of deaths way too high, which tells you you're not really ascertaining them, or you are overwhelmed. And you can see there's quite a lot of new cases and deaths happening in these countries that we've spoken quite a bit about before: Iraq, Iran. A lot of trouble with community engagement in those countries, and people basically ignoring the requested behaviours after the first lockdown. But again, you get this fairly low number of deaths per million population. I thought I'd have a look at Lebanon, since the blast was on August the 4th. This involved some of their hospital systems, which ended up out of service as a result. So not only could they not surge capacity, they actually lost some capacity during this. And if August the 1st is about, I guess it's probably here, the day they didn't report cases, but since then it's really surged. They had planned a lockdown at that stage, but now because of, I guess, supply lines and various, there's more essential services needed now because of the problems they've got. They've been unable to do a lockdown and recalibrate. So Lebanon's getting a double hit there. African region, I won't spend long on this. It's you can see it seems to be coming down, although the deaths are there. So I have a fair bit of trouble interpreting this one. Again, low relative deaths in per million, maybe a reporting or identifying problem. South Africa's up at 26, so that's quite high. And let's go to the Western Pacific now. So there's the Philippine curve, the Japanese curve, the Australian curve. These are all reasons why the Wipro curve is going up. or fairer to say, it's flattening off, and it is flattening off in a lot of these countries. And of course, Singapore is contributing to some downward pressure as well. So to look at these again, very few deaths in our region, but some of the cases are pretty high. New Zealand, of course, is still the talk of the town with this blip. I think they reported 5 cases today. They've got about 85 in this cluster. They did extend the lockdown to Auckland, and I gather that's causing a lot of trouble, because locking down a city where everyone has to explain why they're leaving it or coming into it is crazy, especially when so much there's been cases outside of Auckland anyway. So anyway, that's what they're doing there. And finally, South Korea, they're having this unpleasant uptake here for the last few days now. They've had over 250 cases, around those sort of numbers. So altogether, they've had about 16,000 cases and over 300 deaths. Their test positivity rate's 0.5%. There was this church called the Sarang Jail Church. I don't know what, I'm sure it's not right. But anyway, there's a church, actually 2 churches. There's another one in Gyeonggi, the province that was part of the February issues. So I gather these churches, they get very tightly packed. There's very fervent prayer services, and in fact, this church that is the one at in Seoul, the pastor actually got COVID as well. So again, they haven't shut down and locked down. They've done some behaviour change efforts. They've closed the nightclubs, the karaoke bars, the buffet food eating, the museums. There's been a couple of clusters in coffee shops, including I think 49 in a Seoul Starbucks. They've banned church services and any indoor gatherings of 50 people or more, or 100 people or more if they're outside. There's also been some military cases, and they're quarantining a lot of the military. So I think South Korea will bring this down without a big lockdown. So that's an interesting test case going on there. Okay, Singapore. I think we all know what's happening here. I think today I heard there were no cases in the community. So we're down to this persistently less than 5 type levels here. We know I think there were 68 in the dormitories today. So they're still making their way down with a few still affected. Here's what it looks like across the country. No one in ICU, no recent deaths. Cases in the care facilities are coming down. Cases in the general wards are coming down. So just before I hand back, David, I'll just share this photo, which I guess you were probably off inventing something, but this was closing Ward 43 on Thursday. On Thursday? Must have been yesterday, Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever. The 18th of August, a very auspicious date, where we all got there. This was our cohort ward, so this reflects really that we've really got a lot less cases in hospital, and now all our cases will be in isolation rooms that need to be there, or else the community care facilities. So with that, thanks, shout out to the ID team in NUH and in fact all over Singapore. Back to you, David.
Dale, I noticed amongst the gloom, there's a little bit of joy in your voice. Did you just have a good meal, or are you positive about the future?
I'm always an optimistic person, David, and I'm very excited to hear what Chow Bin's going to talk about.
Okay, very good. All right. Please, those who are listening in, watching in, remember to send in your questions via the Q&A tool at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It now is my honor to introduce Professor Chow Bin, Professor of Internal Medicine at Capital Medical University, Yangtze River Distinguished Professor, Ministry of Education, Vice President of China-Japan Friendship Hospital, Head, Department of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine, China-Japan Friendship Hospital, and Vice Director, National Clinical Research Center for Respiratory Diseases in Beijing. The title of his talk, Antiviral Clinical Trials for Severe COVID-19 in China. Ben, welcome, and over to you.
Okay, Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for kind. Yeah. In the next 20 minutes, I will briefly talk about what I have learned about COVID-19. And this topic is including the Chinese clinical trials and also the knowledge I learned from my colleagues and also the knowledge I learned from the literature. Thanks for the kind invitation and I appreciate the introduction. When I was called to see the patients during the early days of January in Wuhan city, the first series of cases came into my eyes because of those patients have the clinical presentation of pneumonia. After I have go around all the cases with the colleagues working in Wuhan cities, it seems to everyone that the patients share some similarity. Who had been admitted to an infectious disease hospital. Those patients all of them have pneumonia, and this pneumonia has some common features, including the normal white blood cells, complicated with lymphopenia, and the chest radiology show the ground glass opacity, and most of them have the normal procalcitonin, and it seems that all of them have no response to antibiotics. So according to our local China community-acquired pneumonia, because all these patients can be diagnosed as CAP, community-acquired pneumonia, and from our guideline, yes, we have to think of the possible pathogen of these patients with pneumonia. It seems to everyone of us that these patients have the clinical features of viral pneumonia, but not bacterial pneumonia because of the features I have introduced, and all of them have no response to antibiotic. And what is more severe is that some of them have pneumonia, and some of them complicated with respiratory failure, ARDS, and even some of them complicated with acidosis, and one or two of them have acute kidney injury or acute cardiac injury. I think if the medical students and the clinicians have looked at all the features in this page, yes, I think most of them have a word in mind. That is, the word is sepsis. But what we found among these patients is different from sepsis due to bacteremia. Yes, according to the sepsis campaign, it seems that the timely antibiotic and the timely recovery of the low blood pressure is a key point to rescue a patient with sepsis and septic shock. But now, this sepsis is very, very different from sepsis due to bacteremia. It seems that the sepsis and the septic shock is only due to a viral pneumonia. So after a week, we have learned that the causative pathogen is a normal coronavirus, and now this virus is named as SARS coronavirus 2, and the disease is called COVID-19. But during the early days of January 2020, as long as we know the causative pathogen is coronavirus, we are thinking that the sepsis and septic shock is purely a viral sepsis. So we published in Lancet our hypothesis that we show a new concept of viral sepsis. with this concept, we want to show our colleagues that these COVID-19 can be complicated with a kind of severe condition that is complicated with sepsis and septic shock, with one or two or more organ insufficiency. And we have this new concept of viral sepsis is because of we want discourage of our colleagues to not to use broad spectrum antibiotics at the beginning, because there's no use. So if broad spectrum antibiotic is used, and I think there is adverse effects of the antibiotics. Maybe the disturbance of the balance of the microbiome environment of the host, including both the respiratory tract and the gastrointestinal tract. And a lot of knowledge is there. If there is a disturbance of the microbiome environment of the host, maybe there will be an adverse outcome. And what is more disadvantage of the inappropriate use of antibiotic is that maybe the patients, especially those with intubation, may develop the antibiotic resistance, hospital-acquired pneumonia or ventilator-required pneumonia, or secondary fungal infection. So I think it is the benefits of the new concept of viral sepsis has two. The first is that the mechanism of viral sepsis is different from bacterial sepsis. So viral sepsis raised the interest of the clinical researchers and scientists to learn more about the mechanism of the viral pneumonia complicated with ARDS and viral sepsis. And secondly, that the viral sepsis concept is helpful for clinicians to not use broad spectrum antibiotic at the beginning. So I think during the early days of January, most of the countries has no experience of the disease, and at that time, I think only the clinicians in mainland China and some experts in WHO pay attention to the disease, and carefully the WHO call these new disease a potential pandemic. But soon, yes, we have learned that the disease has spread to other parts of the world. First, Italy, the Iran, the Korea, and followed by Spain, France, England, United States. And now we have learned that the most cases come from the United States. So it's a general thing that in the modern life, the transmission of infectious disease is no less 24 hours, because the global can be reached by flight within 1 day. So it's not difficult to understand that in the airplane era, yes, the transmission of infectious disease is more successful and easier compared with 100 years ago during another pandemic of the influenza. So I think there was several markers to cause the fear and helplessness. Yes, I think one marker is that we have friends or relatives to get infected, and the second marker is that the young people died from this disease. And second marker is that maybe the healthcare workers got infected during their work in the hospital, and healthcare workers died from a disease. So it is not difficult to have fear and helplessness. So I think the reason of fear is partly due to that we have no knowledge about this new disease, but I think the knowledge of the new disease need time. But during the early months of this year, I think there's only fear and there's only anger because of our everyday daily life is interrupted by this new disease, by this pandemic. Yeah, the social, and so there's some need of social distance and even closure of schools and public areas such as parks, such as the shops or restaurants. So more and more fear, more and more helplessness is there, especially after people watch TV show or read news from newspapers or internet or YouTube or every kind of source of information. But such information is no helpful for the general people. So there is an urgent need of a magic bullet. Yeah. So I think everyone wants to grab at a straw. Yes. We have heard a lot of stories about the successful treatment of this disease, such as a new drug or even a kind of drink. May be helpful for the yearly patients, but unfortunately, there's no magic bullet. I think no magic bullet not only during the early days, but for now. So there is a beautiful discussion from three ICU doctors from the University of San Francisco, Dr. Tara, Dr. Nida, and Dr. Tisha. They together published opinion in the BMJ, and they said that during the early months, I think not only in America, but also in other parts of the country, in hospitals, the clinicians focus on finding a single magic bullet to cure COVID-19. And there is a good example. There is a drug called hydroxychloroquine. This drug received the emergency use authorization by the U.S. FDA in March, and partly due to the broadcast of the U.S. President Trump. But later, a lot of evidence comes out that the authors think there's no use of the hydroxychloroquine, and even high dose of hydroxychloroquine has very severe side effects. So in mid-June, the U.S. FDA revoked the emergency use of this drug. The American doctors also show the concern that the clinician have interest of finding a magic bullet, but they have forgotten the life-saving modalities sometimes, such as they have very proven strategies such as the lung protective ventilation strategy, prone position ventilation, and these kind of strategies have very proven and very established the standard therapy for ARDS during. But because of it's a new disease, and it seems that the old strategy may be no use for treatment of COVID-19, but it's wrong because the COVID-19 patients complicated with severe pneumonia and ARDS, they also respond to the lung protective ventilation or prone position ventilation. It seems to that even during pandemic, even during fear of helplessness, we clinicians should trust evidence, and we should not trust the anecdotes. So I think the smart clinicians should make the clinical decision based on evidence, even in the era of COVID-19. So I think for every clinician, every country, yes, we should remain committed to doing the best we can for our patients. So as I have mentioned that the COVID-19 is a new disease, but COVID-19 is complicated with clinical conditions that are common to our clinicians, not only to the specialists but also to the residents, such as we should use antibiotic optimally, and we should use the smart strategy for treatment of ARDS, and we should manage the acidosis timely, and we should treat the acute kidney injury, and also we have to treat the patient complicated with heart failure. And if there are some coagulation defects, the anticoagulation therapy is the standard. So again, I will tell you that even for new disease COVID-19, the clinical decision making should always follow evidence we have known. So even I think maybe we will have next pandemic, yes, during the next 10 years, but we have learned from the lessons we have learned from this pandemic is that even we are facing a new disease, we do not in the position that we know nothing. We have some knowledge. We have some knowledge to fight against a severe disease. This disease has common features such as pneumonia, such as ARDS, such as acidosis, and such as septic shock. So I will appreciate the hard work of the scientists and researchers all over the world that little by little we know the new disease, and we know more about the pathology and pathogenesis of this new disease. This is a beautiful review from the Journal of Immunity, and we can find that at first the virus replication is there. So during the first 1 week or as long as 10 days, virus is get to the peak of the viral load and then decline slowly. And at the same time of the virus decline, the innate immune response is there, and also the adaptive cellular response is there, and this is that we call the hyperinflammation stage. This is during the second week till the third week. And during this time, during the second week or third week, the patient may present with a severe disease complicated with ARDS or the marked organ insufficiency. So when we know more about the nature of the disease, and if we know more about the pathophysiology, we will understand the potential therapeutic target. So it is easier to understand that the antiviral have the maximal effect during the increase of viral titers, especially during the first week and as late as the second week. And also it's during this week that maybe the neutralizing antibody or monoclonal antibody targeting on the binding protein of the virus should have some effects. And during the second to third weeks, if the patient is complicated with hyperinflammation, and it seems that the immunomodulator may have some efficacy, including the corticosteroids or the interleukin-6 receptor antagonisms and other kinds of the immunomodulators. And after 1 month, if the patient are lucky to recover, then they go to the convalescent stage. But at this time, that we know little about the how long the symptoms and how long the organ damage, especially the lung damage, should last. 3 months or 6 months or even longer. Yes, I think it is urgently needed to study patients during the follow-up. So when we look at the potential therapeutic target, there are 2 groups. The first is that the antivirals, and second group is the immunomodulators. It seems to us that the combination of antiviral and immunomodulator drugs should be the future. Antiviral monotherapy, I think, is not enough for severe cases, and the immunomodulator monotherapy might have some potential risk if the patient still have very high viral titers. And my colleague and I have proven that the RNA anemia, and that is the definition of the viremia, is an independent risk factor for death of severe COVID-19. This is a meta-analysis just published in BMJ, and it is a complicated map. But I want you to figure out the color of these tables. The red color means the harmful. The green color means the protective. And the yellow color means there's no difference. Yes, compare the intervention arm and the standard arm. The black means that there's no data, and the gray means that there's no enough sample size. And from this table, we can find that there's one drug have the red color. That is the hydroxychloroquine, which means that this kind of drug have the adverse events, and that will be harmful for the patients. And there are only 2 drugs, 2 or 3 drugs have the green color. One is the glucocorticoids, and from the report or recovery study led by Dr. Peter Hobby, that it seems that the corticosteroid can reduce the 28 mortality and reduce the likelihood of mechanical ventilation. And then second drug is the remdesivir, and remdesivir is proven to reduce the time to symptom resolution, but there's no effect on the mortality. And so in conclusion, that the corticosteroids were the only intervention with evidence reducing death and mechanical ventilation with moderate certainty. And there are another 3 drugs made to reduce the symptom duration compared with standard therapy, including hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, and lopinavir. But we must keep in mind that hydroxychloroquine might increase the risk of adverse events compared with the other interventions. So we can find that even today there's very, very limited evidence that a kind of treatment have the rescue efficacy of the COVID-19, especially for severe COVID-19 patients. Although it seems that the systemic corticosteroids is the only magic bullet, but we have to keep in mind that there are many uncertainties, even for these kind of drugs. I think the clinicians are very, very familiar with corticosteroid because it is widely used in clinical settings, not only in the lung disease, but also for the rheumatoid disease, the kidney disease, and even liver disease. And even for the lung disease, corticosteroids have been used in other kind of clinical settings, such as community-acquired pneumonia, severe influenza, and ARDS. But everyone have known that during the medical history, there's no consensus about the benefits of corticosteroids because systemic corticosteroid is regarded as two-edged. So when we use corticosteroid, we have to think ahead of the potential risk of the corticosteroid. As I have mentioned, although COVID-19 is a new disease, but the clinical complications, including ARDS, including sepsis, is not new. So I think the long-term efficacy effect of corticosteroids on mortality and the functional outcome of survivors is not clear. And there's no report about the monotherapy corticosteroid and the combination therapy with antivirals. It will be potentially risky if the patient has no antiviral therapy as the combination, and also because of the impact of corticosteroid on immunity, and maybe there is risk of secondary bacterial fungal infection. And the patient maybe die from the secondary hospital infection. And also we have to think about the contraindication of systemic corticosteroid, including immunosuppression conditions and including patients with the tuberculosis or and other kind of severe co-infections. And also not only our group, but also a group from other countries have shown that the corticosteroid may have the adverse effects of the viral replications. As I mentioned, that the viremia is an independent risk for adverse outcome of the COVID-19 patients. At last, I will briefly introduce the clinical trials of lopinavir and the remdesivir ASI. I have led it during the early months of the COVID-19 in Wuhan. When I start to design the antiviral clinical trial now, maybe I will not choose the severe pneumonia patients as our target population. The reason that I chosen severe pneumonia patients because that during the early days, in most cases I saw are patients with pneumonia and the hypoxemia, and I want to get a kind of treatment to rescue such patients. So maybe you can tell that. Dr. Cao Bing, you are also wanted to find a magic bullet. Yes, to tell you the truth, this is what I have thought. During the early days of the January 2020, yes, my colleagues and I want to get a kind of magic bullet, but after 6 months, and we have gathered all the evidence, including the lopinavir trial and the remdesivir trial. Yes, I have to admit that it's hard to get a kind of magic bullet. I think another limitation of the clinical trial is that the median day from the symptom onset to the enrollment is 12 to 13 days. So maybe you have already remembered that the picture I showed you, a review published in Immunity, the viral replication occurred during the first week. So if the antiviral is initiated very late, even on the median day of 12 or 13, the viral replication is declining. Yeah, so So it is not difficult to understand that at that time, the late use antivirals should have very small beneficial efficacy. So at this time, yes, if I'm going to have a clinical trial design for the efficacy and safety of antivirals, I will choose patients with mild to moderate symptoms, and I will give antivirals during the early days. For example, no later than 7 or 9 days. If the antivirals is given later than 1 week, maybe I think there's a very limited efficacy of the antivirals, especially the antiviral was given as monotherapy. So I will not repeat another trial, remdesivir trial of China, because we repeat the study design of the lopinavir, and we are trying to find a second magic bullet, but it's feared. Remdesivir is proven not a magic bullet for severe COVID-19 complicated with pneumonia and hypoxemia. So but I think the lesson is lesson, but lesson can tell me something. Yeah, if it is possible, antiviral, including remdesivir and lopinavir, should be given during the early days of the illness. So at last, I will briefly tell something about the China experience of control of COVID-19. It seems that the public awareness of disease is there, and the widely use of mask for every person in every city. And I think another experience is that China has built very strong PCR testing capacity, and the early diagnosis is made usually within 24 hours of patients suspected to have disease and those in close contact with the patients. During the last month, the technicians and microbiologists from mainland China go to Hong Kong to help there to increase the testing capacity. The third experience is that the severe critical cases are centralized into medical centers, where specialists all over the country are working together to take care of the patients, including primary physicians, ICU doctors, ID doctors, microbiologists, cardiologists, and the kidney doctors. And the last experience is that if the patient have proven confirmed COVID-19 of the severe and critical cases and admitted to medical centers or ICUs, they will get 100% reimbursement of the medical expenses. So the China government have done a lot to help the patients with COVID-19. So at last, I will thanks all my colleagues in China, Japan, French State Hospital, and also thanks the can here from Fred Hayden and Peter Hobby, and I will also appreciate the hard work from the several hospitals in Wuhan cities. And the last, I will show respect to all healthcare workers involved in the diagnosis and treatment of COVID-19 in mainland China. And thanks for attention.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate you calling out our colleagues that are healthcare workers. That's very kind of you. And we very much appreciate your insight. We don't have much time for questions. I'll try to get a couple in. In light of 80% of patients with COVID-19 doing well without antiviral or anti-inflammatory therapy, outside of clinical trial, what criteria do you use to determine when to start antiviral treatment and or anti-inflammatory treatment?
Yeah, the question is about the antiviral. Yes, I think there are two points. First is the right timing, and second is the right drug and the right dosing. As I have introduced, that the antiviral should be given very early. Yeah, it's better. It's optimal to use antiviral within the first week from the onset of symptom. and it seems that there are two kinds of drugs as the potential choice. The first is remdesivir, and second is lopinavir. So, but there are also some uncertainty is that if there is a combination of the virus is helpful. There's a good clinical trial from Hong Kong, China, that the combination of the lopinavir with the
ribavirin.
Ribavirin and interferon beta, three drug combination is more potent compared with monotherapy. Over.
Yep. So, but 80% are going to do well. So if you're going to treat early, how do you pick whom among those 80% to give the antiviral to?
I think it's not easy, because especially during the early days of pandemic, the patient have some difficulty to go to see a doctor, and so maybe the delay is not only not the delay from the doctor, but also a delay from the home to the hospital. So it is the problem. But I think we have learned more about the disease, and we learn more about the efficacy of the antivirals. So maybe for COVID-19 will be the similar with the seasonal influenza, as we all know that the oseltamivir should be effective within the 48 hours from the symptom onset.
Just one last question. In dealing with clinical investigation and the evolution of it, how appropriate are the COVID-19 clinical trial endpoints? How have they changed since the beginning of the outbreak? Is length of stay or drop in viral load still useful from your perspective?
I think the symptom and the length of stay should be listed as a secondary outcome. I agree that if we have a very potent treatment choice, the 28 mortality should be the first choice, followed by the 7 category ordinal scale. I think it is the subjective, and it is very easy to measure. You may understand that during the early days in Wuhan, when I conducted the clinical trials, so the researcher assistant have some difficulty go inside the isolation ward. So I think the clinical trial, the clinical outcome should be very easy to measure, and it is the subjective and not objective measurement. So it will be helpful. So I do believe that the 7 category ordinal scale is very good. And you may understand the NIH remdesivir trial at first also use the same outcome as we use for our remdesivir trial, but later they have changed the outcome at the clinical improvement. The clinical improvement should be regarded as secondary outcome and not the primary outcome. Yes.
Great, thanks. And I apologize, but we're going to move over to Dale to give us his second segment. Dale, over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so thanks, Ben. Ben's always been a bit of a hero of mine. He went to Wuhan as soon as it started. I'd love to hear more about those early days. It must have been very chaotic, and he was there till the end. So well done for all your service to humanity, Ben. It's been outstanding. Okay, I did have a video to show. I apologize to the people that are expecting to see that, but I'll have to move it to next week. Just so I've got a few quick ones here that I think we can still do if people don't mind hanging on for a couple more minutes. This week we published all the shout out to everyone in Goan that's out there. We put a letter into Lancet and got about 15 authors out of it. But a couple of weeks earlier there'd been one on the worst is yet to come, and we thought, look, we can do better than that. So we did a letter called Back to Basics, and we emphasized, and obviously the editors liked it, and it was emphasizing the fact that lockdowns and border closures are not an outbreak response strategy. They're really only there to buy you time, and it's quite frustrating when when you hear of countries and states and things just saying, no, we're locking down for another few months. So, I hope that they will build up their public health responses, develop that community engagement to accept things that they may not be used to accepting, latest science as the goalposts move a little bit. We discouraged politicization and also suggested that they broaden the advisory pool, because I think a lot of government health departments may not have a lot of people that have done outbreaks before, and every country's full of outbreak responders. So anyway, that's the first nice one. The second one, when this came out on the weekend, was in every newspaper, was on every TV channel. It was this whole business of Malaysia's got a version of the virus that's 10 times more infectious. And I thought, oh, this is going to take up my time this week. So I went and did some study and made a lot of phone calls, and I can just explain it to you briefly now. A lot of it was based on this paper by Korba, and actually you can see this mutation, which is on the spike protein, was around. You can see the blue there. It was actually around through in January and February. So it's actually not new, but you can see what happened in March is that it really became the dominant type. So is that founder effect, or does it have a survival advantage? Founder effect, you can see it's in different countries, because it was about now that Europe and the US were becoming epicenters of COVID. So it could just be that as that mutation arrived, maybe it was the first one to arrive, and because the infection control and the outbreak response processes weren't in place, it managed to get a really good hold. That's the founder effect. Whether it's got a fitness advantage, which means it can reproduce better, or something like that. So by May the 6th, there were 329 naturally occurring variants in this spike protein. So this is naturally worrying, because it's the spike protein that does the attachment. But the studies, including this one here, showed that patients with this mutation actually shed more virus. They've got lower CT values. But again, that's not 100% translatable to reality, because obviously there's different labs being involved. There's different days of the illness. So can it be translated from the lab to epidemiologically? It's not particularly. It's not affecting the binding site. The
ACE2 receptor.
No, the actual binding site.
Receptor binding domain.
Yes, the receptor binding domain. Thank you for rescuing me. Is different to this. So while this is near it and it could affect it, actually a mutation is not necessarily going to interfere with the binding capacity, unless it actually changes the shape of that receptor binding domain. So with all these mutations happening, it's very important that we get people that can actually monitor the genetic changes, and because it could also affect the tests. It could affect severity. The spike protein is less likely to affect severity, obviously. Therefore it was, so I just wanted to shout out to Sebastian Morestro and his team from A*STAR and the BII and the Genome Institute. So thanks, Sebastian, for all the work you're doing. Gavin Smith was also very knowledgeable in this area and was helpful in helping me put this together. So, which I haven't done very well. So anyway, so that's this. I don't know where the 10 times came from, but I'm sure it's buried in one of those papers somewhere. But really, and the other thing to note is that all the interventions actually are going to work for for whatever the transmission rate is. It's not like we're changing the mode of transmission. Okay, moving on. Drones. You remember this one, David? This is over Seoul. These are the drones with lights, and they put on a lovely show for us one night. Well, I was interviewed by radio in Malaysia who had all these questions about how we're going to go forward with surveillance. And they said, what about drone surveillance? And I thought, is that a big thing? And anyway, so there are drones that can have eyes, and they can go around looking in crowds for people with symptoms. It sounds a lot like Big Brother. If you're coughing or sneezing, they can detect these people. They can even detect temperatures, obviously. We know we can walk past machines that can do our temperature and our heart rate. So that's a little bit of a concern. They've got sprayer drones so that you can, they're modified agricultural drones that can go and disinfect areas. And they are being used in China and Chile and Indonesia and Philippines and whatever. But I just hope they're not spraying people. You can do food deliveries. We know most of the restaurants and cafes at various times have been closed. So would this be a way to do those? There are other drones that go around and they can talk and they can tell you if you need to socially distance or put your mask on, things like that. These worry me, but apparently they're in France and Spain and they're being tested out there. And also like this one at the bottom, it can actually deliver PPE. It could deliver samples or specimens. So anyway, drones, there you go. Here's a thermometer car. This can go around looking at people and I guess detecting temperatures and things like that as well. I'm not advocating for these. I just thought this was a very curious direction we're going. And if you want to get more curious, then let's talk about sniffer dogs. Norman, Digby, Star, Jasper. These are being looked at in UK. I think they're already in UAE. And these dogs, there's a couple of publications you can see on these. This particular, can't remember, I think it was the BMC one. They had 187 positive samples and they detected 157 of them. So about a 84% sensitivity in dogs smelling saliva and tracheobronchial specimens. So how that translates to the real world, David, I'm not quite sure, but all I could say is, wouldn't it be great if this whole outbreak could be solved by puppies? Back to you, David.
Sweet, yeah, and they do it fast, and they do it for kibble. So
1 second it takes.
1 second per specimen. Yep. Thank you, Dale. It leads me to thank Prof Cao for sharing his insight with us and taking time from his busy day to be with us. And thank you so much. He came 2 weeks earlier than he was scheduled, and we're grateful for his flexibility. Next week's, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have one speaker a week, Sir Jeremy Farrar, who's director of Wellcome Trust and past director of the Oxford University Clinical Research Unit in Vietnam. He'll be speaking on global research strategies and coordination. The other week will be Dr. Maria Van Kerkhoff. She's head of emerging diseases and zoonosis unit, as well as COVID-19 health ops and technical lead, as well as global infectious hazards preparedness health emergencies program, all for the World Health Organization. And she'll speak to science and global public health guidance in the time of COVID-19. There's a chat box tool at the bottom of your screen. We would appreciate your feedback. It'll be open for another 10 minutes or so. Please use it. Until next week, stay safe, wash your hands, and only karaoke in the privacy of your bedroom. And finally, listen to the Lion King when he sings Hakuna Matata. Don't worry, be happy. Good night.